more people come in. We were learning last time, we were covering chapter 19 of Sefer Devarim, of the book of Deuteronomy, and we were learning about the cities of refuge in the context of Judaism's ideas of death and killing, because we were moving towards a greater discussion of Jewish concepts of war. And we're going to continue from where we left off. Let me be sure I've got the, yeah. Let me just be sure I've got that up. Okay. Take that off the screen. There we go. So we covered the cities of refuge, and I wanted to give you a little bit better picture of what we were talking about by putting this on the screen for a moment. Here's the land of Israel, and one of two variations of maps. And as you could see, in the land of Israel, you had the Jordan River. That's the main body of water here. A little bit north is the Sea of Galilee, Yam Kinneret. A little bit south is the Dead Sea. And so there's a natural border. By the way, for modern times, you can see, even in terms of modern times, that's the natural border between, let's say, Israel and Jordan, the country of Jordan, which is a false country. There never was a country of Jordan. As you could see, east of the Jordan River on the so-called East Bank, you also had the land of Israel, Reuven, Gad, and some of Manasseh. But certainly everything in the west of Jordan was Eretz Yisrael. There was no West Bank. The British artificially created the so-called West Bank. And it's supposed to be the West Bank of the Jordan River. That's why it's called bank of a body of water. But it extends 95% of what's called the West Bank isn't anywhere near a river, nowhere near the bank. It's all artificial. It's good to know, and it's good to keep remembering what the land, because that's why I continually keep pointing out there are no such thing as Palestinians, and there's no such thing as Palestine. This is Palestine. The land of Israel is Palestine. The one thing you have to say for the people that demonstrate for Hamas and say from the river to the sea, Mediterranean Sea, all of Palestine will be free. The one thing you got to say for them is they're right. All that land is one land. They have in mind, when they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they have in mind there'll be no more Jewish Israel. And just in Arab Palestine. And by the way, since the Arabs won't allow any Jews to live in their country, that means there'll be no more Jews living. That means 9 million people, of whom 7 million are Jews. 7 million Jews are we'll dump them in the sea. What are we going to do with them? Who cares? And where they're right is that from the river to the sea, it's one country. And the better slogan should be, from the river to the sea, Israel will be free. But when we put an end to this Palestine Authority, we'll see what happens. So that's why it's good to look at the biblical map. Now, let's go back to what we were learning last week. So we learned there were 6 cities of refuge, 3 west of the Jordan River, 3 east of the Jordan River, where, God forbid, if there was a accidental killing, the accidental killer had to get into one of these cities before the Goel Hadam, the blood avenger, the one who, a kinsman, someone, family member, not a friend, but a family member, had the right to kill the accidental killer if the accidental killer did not get into one of these cities. The Goel Hadam, the avenger of blood, was forbidden to hurt the accidental killer within the city. It's almost like a game where you're free if you get to home. And otherwise you're out, literally out. And that's how it worked. And so you, as I described last week, one of the cities on each side of the bank was north, one more towards the middle, and one towards the south. And Hebron is not really south. Hebron, Judea is modern day Israel. It's kind of in the middle. There's Yerushalayim. There's Benjamin on the border of Benjamin and Yehuda. Binyamin and Yehuda is Yerushalayim, just barely in Benjamin's territory. Hebron is part of Judea, Yehuda. And the real south, you keep going down till you get down towards Gaza, yada, yada, yada. And here we had on the east, you had, besides Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh, you had the countries of Ammon and Moab and Edom. We've seen that in other variations in our Tuesday night map that we use. And just to give you one more look at it, another way it was depicted, if it's easier to see this way, these big red spots are the cities of refuge. Okay. The Chafetz Chaim has an extraordinary learning. Chafetz Chaim notes that according to the Talmud, it was halachically obligated by the government. They had to put up, according to halacha, they had to put up road maps, road signs, signposts to the cities of refuge. You didn't just have those cities designated, but they actually had to have signs this way to the city, so that, God forbid, if someone killed someone accidentally, now his life is really in danger because a relative is allowed to kill him. No justification needed, no nothing. A relative can just go and kill him. So he had to get to a city of refuge immediately before he started explaining himself, apologizing, figuring out what he's going to do with the rest of his life. He didn't have time to mull it over. And if he can't find his way to the city in those days, there's no GPS, there's no MapQuest, Google Maps. You just have to run or get on a wagon or get on a horse or a camel and find it. So you had to put up road maps. Okay. And Chafetz Chaim comments, it's interesting that they had to put up road maps, road signs, street signs to find the city of refuge. And he says, you would think that with all the tourists and pilgrims coming to Yerushalayim every year for the three festivals of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, plus Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you would think there should be a halacha to put up road signs to find the Beit HaMikdash. Because from all over the world, pilgrims would come to Yerushalayim to find the Beit HaMikdash, to be there for the festivals. And he says there's no halacha to put up road signs for that. And it's interesting. Well, look, on a simple practical matter, there's not life and death to find the way to the Beit HaMikdash if you have trouble finding it, so you'll get there later in the day or get there tomorrow. Whereas you have to get there right away for the accidental killing. But he added something really interesting idea. He said, we want road signs to the cities of refuge because we don't want accidental killers knocking on people's doors, asking the way to the city. Because it's not spiritually healthy to continually encounter people who just killed someone, even if it's accidental. The idea of having a constant interference and constant visit from another one and another one and another one. Excuse me, which way to Hebron? Why? Well, I just killed somebody. Oh my God. Oh my God. You take a left turn, you take a right turn, you go 3 miles, and then Yashar, Smola, Yamina. And oh my God. And you look at your spouse and you say, wow, what a crazy thing. Gee, hope he's okay. And then 10 minutes later, like the telephone with all the robocalls, it's sort of like, excuse me, do you know the way to the city? What? I just killed somebody. Oh my God, you too? I just saw. And like every 25 minutes or every 4 hours or once every 2 days, there's an accidental killer coming by. It's not good spiritually. Gee, a lot of Jews killing people. It's not good. So Chafetz Chaim says, we want to have road signs, not only for their benefit, but for our benefit. We shouldn't be encountering around the clock people that kill people. And on the other hand, we want people to be lost on the way to the Beit HaMikdash, to knock on the door, because we want to encounter at our home. Excuse me, do you know which way to the Beit HaMikdash? Why? Well, I'm from Albania. I'm a Jew from Albania, and I've waited all my life to come to Yerushalayim this year for Pesach. I'm a Jew from Scotland, and I waited all my life this year to come for Shavuos. And oh, it's my pleasure. You go here and you go there and you go. It's a thing. It's spiritually rewarding. And so it's a very interesting idea. I wanted to share that with you. So we go forward now with the text. And here we go. Let's take that off. Oh, it's always take the bar off the screen. It's a perpetual problem. Okay, the challenge. So we learned chapter 19. And we learned that if somebody does commit an accidental killing, then he can be saved. But a premeditated murder, first murder in the first degree, someone who hates someone else and planned to murder him, then he should be executed. That one gets executed. And if he will run to one of the safe cities, if he'll run to a safe city of refuge, then the elders of that city take him out of the city. And they hand him over to the kinsman to kill him because he's a premeditated murderer. So have no mercy on him. And it's good that you should wipe out this person, eradicate such people, and thereby purify and sanctify and validate the blood that was spilled essentially in vain, that there should be justice, and the one who did that should by all means be killed. Okay. I wanted to give you that. And it talks a little bit more about the idea. And then finally, we learned in chapter 19 that that they were very strict with witnesses in a murder trial. And that if witnesses plot together to get a guy they hate convicted of murder and executed, and he's innocent, Torah says if we find out the witnesses were lying and plotting, then they're called Eidim Zomimim. The singular one is Eid Zomim, plural Eidim Zomimim. And we do to them as they plan to perpetrate against the guy they were targeting. And they get an even death penalty. If they testified against another guy to get him executed, and we find out, they are executed. And that's V'darshu HaShoftim Hetei, V'hinei Eid Sheker HaEid. Let the judges investigate very thoroughly. And if it turns out that the witness is a liar, perjury, sheker anava achiv, and deliberately perjured himself and testified, lied against his neighbor, biasitem lo ka'asher zamam lasot lachiv. You do to him what he attempted to do and perpetrate against his brother. Uvi arta harami kirbacha, and you will exterminate and wipe out the evil from your midst. So even to a Jew, we will exterminate. So you have to understand, the Torah is no nonsense when it comes to lives. And people are executed. It's not like this modern day sympathy and mercy, and there's no capital punishment because we don't want to go that far, and we want to rehabilitate. And it's not what the Torah. The rehabilitation is that of society wiping out evil, so that the Hanish Arim Yishmu V'Yirau, that the rest of the society will hear and will fear. And people will not do this. And therefore, you don't end up with the crime rates that you have in the United States, because you kill these people out. And you do not have mercy. None of this kind of Western sympathy and mercy where they don't do capital punishment, where like throughout Europe, capital punishment is banned. And in the United States, there are states that do capital punishment like Texas, I believe Florida, and probably Oklahoma, and probably several others. And then there are states that they don't do capital punishment. And historically, California has bounced back and forth, depending on where the society has been. Torah says capital punishment, an eye for an eye. And we learned last time, not literally, but so to speak, you get justice. And that brings us to where we're really going now, the laws of war. But we have this background now that we also kill members of our own society if they are killers. We don't tolerate those who kill. And by the way, we distinguish the terminology kill. Just for the record, we should just be very clear that let's get it out. Let's see, let's get it up there right. Exodus, I guess would be about 22. I'm off by a few. Here we go, 21. All right, get there. It's 19. I run into this once in a while when I get myself in trouble like that. But what I want to show you is, okay, now that I've got that, now it's not going to go up at all. It's so what we have, for example, is, try it one more time. Sure. Just give me a moment. And I know this just happened the other day, and I shouldn't do this, but I'm normally pretty good at it. What I want to do is, I want to bring up the Aseret HaDibrot. Yeah, there we go. It's just off that line. I'm sorry. So I wanted to bring up the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 pronouncements or 10 commandments, Exodus 20, and Lo Tirtzach, you shall not murder. Lo Tirtzach, you shall not murder. And the distinction between murder and killing. Killing is permitted. The soldiers at war kill the enemy. You kill an ant. Killing is allowed. Murder is forbidden. People too easily in the English language use the term killing and murder as though they mean the same thing. And among the Christians, the King James Bible translation mistakenly says, thou shalt not kill. And it mixes everything up, because then it creates a massive distortion and misconception of what the 10 pronouncements are saying there. Because if you're not allowed to kill, then how do you justify going to war? So we're all hypocrites, because we're really not supposed to kill, but we do kill, and it convolutes the whole thing. Torah says, lo tirtzach, not lo taharot. You shall not murder. You certainly may kill, which is where we're going right now. You certainly may kill. In the enemy, for example. And so we continue. Ki tetzei lemilchama al oivecha, when you'll go to war against your enemy, v'ra'ita sus v'rechev am rav mimcha, and it turns out they way outnumber you. Think of Israel being founded in 1947, 1948, one country of Holocaust survivors with barely an army, no air force to speak of, no navy to speak of, almost no weapons to speak of. Forget about tanks. They didn't even have rifles, pretty much, just enough. And they're up against 7 Arab armies, the Arab Legion. And you'll go to war and you'll be outnumbered like crazy, or in a way, even today. On the south, we have Hamas. On the north, we have Hezbollah. On the east, we have the so-called Palestine Authority, Fatah and Mahmoud Abbas, and we're being attacked from 3 sides. And right behind Hamas, next on the map is Egypt. presently there's peace, which is why we have Hamas. And on the north, there's also Syria in the northeast. There's Lebanon in the northwest. And then a little bit farther down, there's Iraq. And you're surrounded by Rav Mimcha, by way more people than you are. Lo tira mehem ki Hashem Elokacha imach. You shall not fear them because the Lord God is with you. And someone may read this now and say, well, that's very nice. I mean, that's very nice, but let's be practical. So yeah, Rabbi, I'm glad I'm here in class now, and that was interesting how we learn about King Saul and King David, and they stood up. But really, Rabbi, honestly, he is 2024, and we got enemies. And I mean, I have people, not members of our shul, but I have people who look and they say, I don't think Israel's going to make it. I don't see how Israel's going to make it. Lo tira mehem. You don't be afraid of them. Israel's certainly going to make it. They're the ones who should be afraid. Ki Hashem Elokecha imach hama'alcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, because the Lord God is with you. He who took you out of Egypt. What does that have to do with it? What does that have to do with anything? I got a war now with Hamas and Lebanon. What good does it do me to start telling me about Egypt? That was, here's what it does. It reminds us that we had no way to get out of Egypt. We were outnumbered. We were ragtag slaves against the world's greatest power. And when we finally did get out with the 10 plagues and we made it to the Red Sea, we had the strongest army in the world with their chariots and their horses right up, and we had no way out. And he took us out. We got out anyway. How did we make it past the 1956 war in 100 hours? How did we win the Six-Day War against countries? Egypt, Syria, Jordan. How did we do it? Yom Kippur War. If you study the Yom Kippur War, it began very, very badly, and another country might have gone under. We didn't. Indeed, it's almost a kiss of death to be America's ally. America is not a good, reliable friend. She's a good friend, and I'm proud to be an American, and I love America. But America is not a good ally. Look at South Vietnam. All they needed was a promise from America, we'll always be with you. Already they could start moving to Orange County. Forget about it, forget Saigon. Saigon's the bygones. They're finished. America's with them. End of story. Who else is America with? You see what's going on now. I don't want to get into Ukraine, Russia exactly. That's for a political discussion that our class is a Torah class. We're not going to take sides. But you see how in the beginning, a year ago, America's position was, we'll always be with you. We are united as a country. We're behind you, Ukraine, Zelensky. You can take it to the bank. And now half the Senate, half the Congress, they don't want to support it anymore. It's enough. We gave a year and a half. It's enough. We don't have enough money for home. We can't control our border. You know all the arguments. I'm not saying that those are my arguments. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't want to get into it. This is a Navi class. But look how all of a sudden we're behind you, the entire Senate and House, 100%, everybody except for Bernie Sanders is behind you. And now half the Senate, half the House, maybe. Can't rely on America. I'm not saying Europe's better. Europe's worse. Europe doesn't even start off on the right foot. But what's going to do it for Israel? You have to have faith in God. And if you have faith in God, it will work. And that's Israel's history. I said it in last week's class. In 1956, America was not behind Israel. Eisenhower, absolutely not. And by the way, Harry Truman, who they make into like Saint Harry in Israel because he voted in the UN to recognize the state of Israel. Everyone who has studied that period knows, you've probably heard of it, that American Jewish kids in 1948 ran guns to Israel. American Jews and the mafia, the Italian mafia. It's crazy. You had Jews in the mafia, Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, And they were good friends with the Italians, Lucky Luciano and all those chevra. And they were friends. And friends take care of friends. I kill your friends, I kill your enemies, you kill my enemies. And we had a problem in the Middle East, and the Italian mafia helped run guns to Israel. Jewish kids at night, in the middle of the night, together with volunteers of non-Jews, Irish, Italian Americans, in the middle of the night, they went to the harbor, the docks in New Jersey, Jersey City, and they ran guns on ships. And the mafia ran the unions. The longshoremen they were all Italians. And the mafia ran that. And the Irish were the police. And everybody, they looked the other way. And Israel got guns. So there's no question. What I'm telling you right now, that is history. What no one ever talks about, if Harry Truman was so good, why were we running guns to Israel? Why wasn't Harry Truman sending the guns? Harry Truman had a boycott. He wouldn't send guns to Israel. He boycotted, he put a freeze on any assistance to Israel. So he voted for a Jewish state, and then he did nothing to support it and let them fend for themselves, them and a bunch of teenage kids in Brooklyn and the Italians in the mafia. I'm serious. So how did Israel do it? God. It was God. So God sent the communists. The Czechoslovakian communists sold rifles to Israel. Kalashnikovs. The communists from Czechoslovakia came 1956. The communists gave up on Israel. They were very hopeful. They were dealing with Jews. Everybody's got the stereotype Jews are leftists and Jews are communists. Turns out Jews aren't communists. They were Marxists, but they were socialists. They weren't so Stalin gave up on Israel. Who's going to stand with Israel? And Eisenhower wouldn't. So France supported Israel. Came 1967, the Six-Day War. They turned to our good friend Charles de Gaulle. He turned his back on Israel. That was last class. I was talking about the gunboats. So what did Israel do? By now, America turned to support Israel. There's always somebody. People say, what happens if Biden won't send weapons? First of all, Israel has weapons. In fact, if Israel really wanted, they could finish off Gaza in one day. If they wanted, people haven't begun to see what Israel could do if she really wanted to engage in indiscriminate bombing and genocide. There would be no more Gaza. It would look like bedrock in the Flintstones. They would turn the whole place into rubble in one day. Secondly, but Rabbi, where will they get guns from? I don't know. Maybe they'll get it from Putin. Putin? Yeah. They'll tell Putin, we back you against Ukraine. They'll get guns. Maybe they'll get guns from India. India, people don't know. India's got a lot of stuff going on because they're dealing with Pakistan. Pakistan are Muslims. India are Hindus. The two of them have nuclear bombs. And that's really where one day, if anybody blows anyone up, it'll be there. Israel's now got stuff going on with India. Who knows? Maybe they'll get it from Red China. Who knows where they get it from? So that's what the Torah is telling us as we go forward. You have faith in God. God will take care. God will take care. And so now, of course, we're Americans, and we do everything we can to try to keep America as Israel's best friend. It makes us more secure as American Jews, puts us in the same footing. And thank God, mostly Biden has been good, but he's already started pressuring Israel, and we don't want to get too much into that beyond this, only to the degree that we need to cover and understand halachas of war. So the Torah says you don't be afraid, and you don't worry about how much you're outnumbered. They are outnumbered because we have God. So they are outnumbered. Now, as you're coming to war, there are two high priests. People don't know this. I mean, Torah people, students of Torah know this, but the average Jew does not know. Well, the average Jew doesn't even know there's one high Kohen Gadol. Go to a Reform rabbi, ask him about a Kohen Gadol. Tell you he's got a guy named Mike Cohen in his temple. What does he know about a Kohen? A Kohen Gadol, everybody Orthodox knows, serves in the Beit HaMikdash, offers the sacrifices on Yom Kippur during that period. There's a second Kohen called the Kohen HaMashuach. There's the anointed Kohen, and he is the high Kohen for war. He goes towards the front of the armed forces as they go into battle. They go into battle, and the Kohen leads the way. That's something, huh? That's some job. And he's fearless because he believes this. And he goes with the Aron, Brit Hashem, the Ark of the Covenant. We learned in our Tuesday night Navi class a few months ago about how the Jews went into battle against the Philistines with the Ark of the Covenant. And what happened when it did not work out in battle and God wanted, for various reasons, for the Jews not to win initially, and the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant. We learned that was something they rued very deeply, and they gave it back. And we learned all about that. They go in, and the Kohen speaks to the nation. V'yamar alehem. And the Torah actually gives you the speech that the Kohen delivers, and he's supposed to deliver the speech. And if there would today be a Beit HaMikdash, this is what would have been spoken to the troops before they went into Gaza. And this is what was spoken to the troops before they went into all the biblical wars. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. In another one, it's famous, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. But this is another Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, atem krevim hayom lamilchama ol oyevechem. Hear, H-E-A-R, hear, O Israel, you now are entering to go to war against your enemies. Al yerach levavchem, let your hearts not melt. Don't be afraid. Al tir'u, don't fear. Al tachbezu, don't panic. Al ta'artzu mipnehem, again, don't be afraid of them. Ki Hashem Elokeichem, ha'holechi machem. This is, by the way, you always hear the melody and the singing of the prayer for the armed forces. Every one of my classes, we always do that. Misheverach avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. There's a line in there. Ki Hashem Elokeichem, ha'holechi machem, lehilachem lachem emoivechem lo shiatchem v'nomar amen. It's where it comes from. As it is written, this is what the Kohen says. Don't be afraid, because the Lord your God, ha'holechi machem, walks with you, lehilachem lachem, to do battle with you, im oivechem, against your enemies. God is in the battle with you. He's in the armed forces, lo shiatchem, to save you. And then, after the Kohen speaks, the high-ranking generals, the officers, the Brushokri Milam, they speak, and they excuse three types of people from battle. There's forced conscription. Everybody has to go to battle. Everybody has to show up. Now that everybody is there, the following people are excused and sent home before the battle starts. Mi ha'ish asher bana bayit chadash v'lo chanacho. Who is there among us now who in the past year has built a new house and has not yet dedicated it, has not had the nachas of living a year in his home, to build a house? Yelech v'yashov leveito, go back and enjoy your house for a year. Pen yamut b'milchama v'ish acher yachnechenu, because God does not want, God forbid, you'll die in battle and someone else will end up dedicating your house. Enjoy your house, at least for your first year of having a house. You're waived, you're excused. Next. Umi ha'ish asher natakarem v'lo chilalo. And who among us in the past year has planted a vineyard Jews planted vineyard. I mean, you're thinking now we're all urban. We American Jews, Israeli Jews, most of us are urban. Who plants a vineyard? We don't plant. We have computers. We have cars. Who's going around planting? If you look in your backyard, what little grass you have, you bring a contractor to pave over it and create a swimming pool in your backyard or in California, whatever. But there, Jews had vineyards. A lot of people had vineyards. Umiha Yishishanata Karam, who is there who has planted a vineyard, velo chilalo, and has not yet harvested it? Yilech v'yashov lebeito, you go back home. Pen yamut b'milchama v'yishacher yachal alenu. It shouldn't be that, God forbid, you'll die in war and someone else will get nachas from your vineyard, will have the opportunity to harvest your vineyard. And who among us has just recently gotten married or just recently gotten engaged? You're supposed to, like in those days, you paid like dowry, whatever. Who has gotten engaged, gotten married, and hasn't yet had intimacy with the wife and gotten started? Go back home. Let, God forbid, person will die in battle and someone else will take the lady you're supposed to marry. So no one's allowed to go to war if they've gotten engaged until they've been married for a year. So it's interesting. And then also, very interesting additional waiver. Anyone who is so scared that they're scared out of their minds also are waived. If you don't have the courage and the fearlessness and the sense that God is with you in battle and you're terrified, go back home, because you will destroy the morale of the army and of the nation. Go back home, and you don't have to join anti-war protests to save your skin, because no one wants you in battle. One of the things that destroyed American society was the anti-Vietnam, anti-war protests of 1960s, late 60s and 70s. Again, I'm not getting into the politics. Maybe it's good to be anti-Vietnam war. Maybe it's wrong. I don't want to get into that. But no matter where you stand, for those that know the history from 50 years ago, the Vietnam War, it destroyed. It wasn't like America united during World War II. It wasn't even like America united during the Korea War of the 1950s. There was a tremendous national division. And all the young people at the universities of the Northeast and the West Coast were demonstrating against the war. And we had the Kent State incident, and we had University of Wisconsin-Madison and Berkeley and all of this stuff, and Columbia University riots, and you had the riots. And a lot of the people were rioting. They weren't against the concept of fighting in Vietnam. Many were, but many of them were against the war because they didn't want to go. They were afraid. 50,000 Americans died in Vietnam, and they didn't want to be 50,001. And I'm not judging them. I am not judging them whatsoever. But had America instead had an all-volunteer army the way we have now, you wouldn't have had those kinds of, you don't have those demonstrations against going into Iraq. You notice? We didn't have those demonstrations against going into Afghanistan. Yeah, they yelled at George Bush and they call him a liar, and you know, how many people did he kill and all of that stuff. But you didn't have the kind of societal ripping apart anti-war movements, because nobody was forcing those who don't want to go to go. The Torah says, after the Kohen Amashuach, the Kohen who's in charge of leading the troops into battle, has made his Shema Yisrael speech, that God will be there, and we're excusing certain people. So now we have the shotrim. The officers have excused those three sets of people, and they add miha ish hayarev v'rachalevav. Who is the one who still is afraid and melted heart? His heart is just disheartened. Even more than that, his heart is shot. He just can't do it. Yelech v'yashov leveito. Go home. Below yimaset levav echav kilvavo. That he should not have his heart go and melt the fierce, courageous hearts of everyone else, lest the courage of his comrades flag. I don't like the translation. As you know, I often, for those of you new to the classes, I often criticize the quality of the Sefaria translations. They're very poor, by and large. Why do I use it? Because they're user-friendly. Okay, for class. Yimas means melt. His heart should not melt the hearts of everyone else. So go home. You're afraid, go home. We don't call him fraidy cat. We don't judge him. Just get out of here. No hard feelings. Let's have a strong army. And those of you who have been attending my Sunday classes that have been covering what's going on in Israel in the war against Hamas, you have seen the extraordinary courage of the soldiers and how they light menorahs in Gaza, put up mezuzahs in Gaza, how they sing and they dance, v'ha'ikar, v'ha'ikar, lo lefachet klal, they're not afraid, and they're singing, anachnu lo mefachadim, anachnu lo mefachadim, we're not afraid. And they're there in battle. Now, I did send out the piece today from one of our shul members about PTSD. It's still an issue. Even the most courageous, heroic kids, you go through war and you have people dying around you and rockets nearly killing you, and people come home with PTSD and traumas. And it's important to know. But they go into battle fearless, and I don't know whether there was PTSD in those days. I don't know how they came home from battle, from the Amalekites and others. But that's how you went into battle. And after all these speeches have been made, and the vineyard people have been sent home, and the house people have been sent home, and the newlyweds have been sent home, and the people afraid have been sent home, and everybody's been told there's nothing to fear because God will be with you. Then it says you set everybody up, and you become battalions and all different kind of units. You're broken into different groups, and you have your heads, and now you go to war. Now, as you approach a city to fight, under halacha, under Jewish law, you first need to offer them peace. You're not allowed, other than Amalek, you're not allowed to do ethnic cleansing. You have to first offer them peace. Every enemy, v'haya im shalom ta'ancha, and if they respond, we give up, we surrender. If they respond in peace, ufatchalach, basically saying, we will open up our city gates, let you in and be sovereign. We don't want war with you. They, the nation, you conquer them, and they become subservient to the Jewish people. You gain sovereignty, and they have to pay taxes to you, and they have to serve you. Not like slaves in the Deep South during the pre-Civil War, God forbid, but they will have to serve you. They will be the ones who carry the water. There was no indoor plumbing in those days. You didn't just open a sink. You had to go to the well to get water. You didn't just turn on a thermostat and heat the house. They'll have to come and schlep the wood for the fireplaces. They will serve you. But they'll live in their own homes. It's not going to be like the American slaves where they're going to come and live in a plantation under your and you're going to break up their families, and you're going to prevent them from having normal life. They'll have normal lives, but they'll serve you. The imlo tashlim imach, and if they say instead, no, we will not make peace with you, you will not have our land, then you'll make war with them. Bitzarta aleha, and you shall lay siege. What's a siege? A siege is not what's going on now in this war. A siege is you don't let in food, you don't let in water, you let them live off the food and water they already have, and as they run out of food and water, they give up, nice and peacefully. And that's what a siege is, not this business of humanitarian. There was, believe me, I've studied American history. I've studied American history. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln had a problem. He could not find we don't know this. Most Americans forget about the Torah. They don't even know American history, for goodness sakes. They don't even know why we have a Senate and a House, why we have a bicameral system. They have no idea about the compromise that was made to create a Senate and a House of Representatives. They have no idea about three chambers of government, the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. The average American, they don't have no clue what's going on. I know this. How do I know? How do I make such a general statement? Because I taught law for 16 years. So I go to law school. They finished college. These are the smartest ones that got into a good law school. And I go in the first year, I'd start putting on the border, I'd be making reference, here we're going to go, we're going to bring the state court, the federal court, and I saw they don't know from nothing. They don't know how the government works. They went through 12 years of high school, and they went through 4 years of college, and they read Marx, Engels, and Frantz Fanon, and they have no idea what's going on in this country. So part of this country is the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln could not find a general to win the war. He started with a guy named McClellan, and McClellan had a big army that could have easily defeated the South. Think of how many states made up the North and how comparatively few made up the Dixie, the South. The war was basically about the South wanted out, and the North said, we're not letting you break off. That was what the war was about. Now, you could get deeper. I don't want to take out the time now to start getting into what the issue of slavery and the issue of states' rights. I don't want to get into that. But the war was, bottom line, why was there a war? Because a certain number of states said, we don't like it here anymore. We're going. And the North said, no, you're not. You're staying in the Union, like it or not. So there were so many more states in the North. McClellan had an army and famously wouldn't go to war. It's not that he was against war. He kept saying, I need to keep training. They're not ready yet. They're not. And he just kept training them. And he kept marching them back and forth, up. And he wouldn't go to war. And Lincoln famously once said to him, I've given you an army. If you don't want it, can you please give it back? And he finally fired him. And he got another general. And he went through like 5 generals. He went through Joe Hooker, and he went through Meade. He went through one general after another until he finally got Ulysses S. Grant. Grant was not his first general. What was the difference? Grant was merciless. So, for example, the last straw before Grant was Meade. Meade was the general at Gettysburg in July 1863. So the North won the Battle of Gettysburg. That was the turning point in the war. That should have ended the war. The war should have ended in 1863. When Pickett's charge failed and got massacred, all Meade had to do was finish the North, finish the South right then and there. The South, under their great general, Robert E. Lee, who really ran out of options, started to flee from Pennsylvania in the North as fast as they could to try to get back to Virginia in the South. And Meade could have wiped them all out. And Meade decided to let them retreat and go back. when Lincoln heard that Meade let them get away and he had them on the run, he fired him. He said, at the same exact day, and there's a reason I'm doing this during our clip, there's the same exact day, July 4, 1863, the same exact day that the North won the Battle of Gettysburg, but let the South get away. On that same day in Mississippi, Ulysses S. Grant, just a general, not the general, was fighting another part of the Civil War and laid siege to Mississippi. He wouldn't let food, he wouldn't let water. And finally, on July 4, 1863, the people of Vicksburg, Mississippi gave up. They have no food, they have no water. We can't fight, and it's hot. They always give up all these sieges, like the Jewish people, Sheva Sarbatamuz, Tisha B'Av. It all happens in the summer. You've been starved out, you have no water, and somehow you make it. But when you're in July and August, if you have no water, that's the end of the game. That's when you give up. It's true of the Jews with Babylonia. It's true of the Jews with Rome, Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, July. And it was true in the United States. Vicksburg gave up. Well, on the same day, Lincoln gets two reports. Meade let them get away in Pennsylvania. Grant starved them out in Mississippi. So he made Grant the #1 guy, put Grant in charge. And for the next 2 years, it took 2 more years, Grant starved them out. Grant would lay siege, and he wouldn't let people eat. He wouldn't let them, no humanitarian, whatever. Will you send medicine through the Red Cross? Nobody got anything through until they're basically dead, and then they give up. And then finally, he starved out Richmond. So you lay siege, and there's none of this nonsense that you'll let medicine through. That's a Western modern you'll notice, by the way, and I mentioned this in something else, that it coincides that they passed all these humanitarian laws, the Geneva laws, after about war crimes and humanity. It all passed in 1947. All these modern war there are two things that have happened from 1947. Since 1947, they have these laws about humanitarian concerns. And since 1947, the United States of America has not won a war. Used to win wars. Nobody has won a war since 1947. America has not won a war. In the end, Vietnam was a mess, and Iraq was a mess, Afghanistan was a mess. Every single time we went in, and it became a mess because of this nonsense. So the Torah makes it clear, you'll lay siege. Unetana Hashem Elokecha biyadecha, and God will give that place to you. You will win that war. Vikita et kol zechura leficharav, and you'll kill all the males. You kill the males and you leave the women alive. Rak hanashim v'ta'af abima v'chol asher yiba'ir kol shalat devosla. You leave the women alive, and the children, and their animals. You'll remember, of course, we learned in Shmuel Aleph, the battle against Amalek. Even the women, the children, and the animals are supposed to be killed. You'll remember we learned that, and Shmuel comes, and Saul left the animals alive, some of them, and the king. With all the other battles, other than Amalek, and again, nowadays, we do not know who is Amalek. So Amalek now is a figurative, it is literal in the Torah. It'll be literal in the end of days, but it is a figurative expression now. When Prime Minister Netanyahu announces we are going to wipe out Hamas the way the Torah says to wipe out Amalek, and now they're quoting that at the UN court, in the International Court of So-Called Justice in the South African thing, that the Prime Minister of Israel, genocide, ethnic cleansing, and they have a quote, they show him saying to wipe out Amalek, leave no one behind. He's talking about Amalek. He's not talking about Gaza. And he was talking about Hamas. Absolutely, kill every last one of them. But not every person living in Gaza, just the Hamas. So the Torah says you leave the women alive, the children and the animals, and you kill all the men. Now you first gave them a chance to be in peace, to live under your sovereignty. And you can't hurt any of them if they say yes. But if they say no when they go to war, kacha, that's how it goes. And you will eat the bounty of your neighbors. That is, you'll have the benefit of their sheep and their cattle, etc., and their wealth and their everything. Asher natan Hashem elokecha lach. Kain ta'aseh lechol ha'arim harchokot mimcha ma'od. Asher lo me'orei hagoyim ha'ela hina. This is how you will deal if you make war with nations far away. This is a very important concept that does not apply nowadays. A little bit, this part apply, what I just taught you actually does apply, and what I'm about to teach you doesn't apply. We are at that point in biblical history not indigenous. Well, we're indigenous. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were originally there, and then they went to Egypt. And we are in biblical times displacing the seven nations: the Chivi, the Amori, the Prizi, the Yevusi, the Girgashi, the Canaani. We're displacing the Canaanite nations. And Denise sent me a link to something that some found some Canaanite DNA in some Lebanese. So very nice. There's no Lebanese currently living in the land of Israel, except in South Lebanon, which is also part of the land of Israel. So currently we don't have to go and take South Lebanon, though we're going to find that we're entitled to that also. But there's nobody alive today who can say, I have proof that I'm a Girgashite. I descend from the Girgashites. I descend from the Canaanites. Those empires are long gone. Like the Babylonian Empire, the ancient Romans are not the same as today's Italians. The ancient Greeks are not the same as today's Greeks. The ancient Egyptians are not the same as today's Egyptians. In biblical times, we are coming, and it's not about indigenous. We're going to occupy the territory. We are going to take territory that belongs to someone else. By the way, that's how every country alive today came into being. The United States of America. God bless America. We love America. We're patriots. We apologize to no one. To the degree that you know American history, a bunch of British people couldn't stand England, so they decided they can't stand the king. So they came across the Mayflower, yada, yada, yada. They set up the original settlements in Jamestown, Virginia, and in Roanoke, North Carolina. And they set up the original colonies, the lost colony of Roanoke. That was the original, that's what it is. They were all occupation forces. Of course, the United States, the indigenous are the Indians. And we took the land from the Indians, absolutely. When Bernie Sanders gives back to the Indians his section of Vermont, and Ben and Jerry give back to the Indians their part of Vermont, now we could start talking about it. Many of the names of the places today, Joe Biden, Delaware, it's a Delaware Indian tribe, the Delaware Nation, the Sioux, the Navajo, the Apaches, all of them came out to California. There's a tribe. I come to California, I'm brand new. I don't know what goes on here. I'm a Jew from New York. I show up in 1987, pick up a copy of the LA Times. In the old days, they had things called newspapers. One of these days, one of the history classes, I'll teach you about it. You used to have a thing called newspapers. You actually could hold in your hand the day's news. It was just as fake, but at least you were holding it. So anyway, I pick up the LA Times, and it is something like, and it's like a page one headline, Chumash demands casinos. And I couldn't figure out, what is that? Chumash demands casinos. And what does that mean? Chumash demands casinos. And I read this, and I start reading. That's like the big headline. You know how a newspaper's got the big front page headline, and then the smallest type? It turns out there's a tribe, an Indian tribe here, called the Chumash. They pronounce it the Chumash. The Chumash tribe. So there's a tribe here, the Chumash tribe. Where did they get that name? So of course they want casinos. That's what we did. That's what we did to the Indians. We took proud people who were proud of their heritage and their pride in scalping each other. And we turned them into people running casinos and gambling operations because under the deals we made with them, what little land we left them, we took everything from them. We left them with these little reservations, land that was reserved for them. And we said that our laws will not apply in their little reservations. They could do whatever they like. And so our laws for the longest time banned gambling outside of Las Vegas. So they saw an opportunity to make money since they could do anything they want under the deals of their treaties with the white man, with the pale face. So they ran casinos, Nebuch. All their kids grow up in casinos, and they have the world's worst alcoholism problem because their children from childhood are all around liquor now. That's what we did to them. So that's how America came about. France is the same. England is the same. If you ever study world history, they literally, in the 700s to 600s, they were known as the barbaric tribes. There were barbarians. I'm not calling them that name like it's an insult. That's what they called themselves. There were the barbaric tribes, the barbarians, and they roamed through Europe and they drove out the Roman Empire. And there were the Franks, F-R-A-N-K, in France. And then there were the Anglos and there were the Saxons. And there were the Teutons, T-E-U-T-O-N, and they were all over the place. And eventually England and France and Germany came to being. People occupied other people. So it's not like such a thing that the Jews are going to now throw out the Girgashites and the Canaanites, the Yevusites and the Hivites. And that's what the Torah says. I promised the land to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This is the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, which, by the way, milk and honey, milk does not mean milk. Milk means, you have to learn the Talmud. Milk means green fields. I will provide green, lush field. It will be a land that has green, lush fields of so much grass that cows will be able to roam in the pasture and endless grass for cows, and they will produce milk. That's what it means, land flowing with milk. And honey refers to dates. The tamar, the fruit called a date. And if you've ever seen medjool dates, M-E-D-J-O-O-L, medjool dates, they are a unique kind of date. The biggest, plumpest, juiciest, it's like a whole different date from the average date you buy in the supermarket. Medjool dates are a whole different, you look for them, they're available in the supermarket. Israel, even today, has 75% of the world market of medjool dates. God's saying, I'll bring you to a place that is lush with grass and with medjool dates. And the way the Torah calls it is flowing with milk and honey, because those dates are so sweet if you have ever those dates. Okay, so the Torah is telling us you go to war, because that's what we're learning on Thursday nights for the foreseeable next, the Jewish laws of war. You'll go to war, you will throw out the 7 nations who are there, and there are going to be different rules we're about to read. And then if after you take sovereignty, you choose to expand your borders beyond the 7 nations, that's what I just taught you. When you go to cities far away, then you cannot just throw them out. You have to first offer them peace. And only if they refuse peace do you go to war. Otherwise, you take it the way we just learned. So that's what we learned. But what about the 7 nations? The 7 nations, that's another story. Let's take a look at the 7 nations. Get this thing there. Get this off the screen. 1, 2, 3. Okay. This is what you do to the cities far away. Okay. As far as the local cities of the 7 nations, okay, we learned about what you shall do with the towns that lie far away, that do not belong to the nations hereabout. The local ones, the 7 nations that I keep referring to, the Chivi and the Yavusi and the Girgashi and the Kanani, as far as they go, lo techayek kol neshamahu. You don't leave anyone alive. You kill them all. God's saying, I want you to kill out these nations. Ki hacharem tacharimem. Now, this doesn't apply to today. So we have to completely separate our Western values from a period that was 3,000 years ago. That's a long time. 3,000 years ago, these were people who took their children and offered them to their idols and set them on fire as human sacrifices. We have to understand who we were dealing with. We were dealing with people who had no concept of human life as we know it. They gave their own children up as human sacrifices, their daughters. Forget about Arab honor killings today. They killed their daughters under all kinds of circumstances. Think of how China had people killing their daughters because they're limiting their population, and parents, therefore, if you can only have one child, let's say, or two, they want to have boys. So when they reach old age and there's no social security, they'll have boys to work their farms to support them and not leave them homeless. We cannot begin to project the modern day people onto what they were, but we can look a little bit at what goes on with Hamas. You saw what happened in our own lifetime. In our own lifetimes, we actually witnessed our own lifetimes, in our own month, we just witnessed the people who do such things as, this is not propaganda, who take women who are pregnant and with a knife, while the woman's alive, cut out the fetus while the woman is screaming, not even for her fetus. They take out the fetus and then they stab the fetus to death. And the woman with the cut open stomach, blood, they stab her to death. And then they take other children and they turn on an oven, and with the child still alive, they put, even Hitler, for goodness, even Hitler went to the inconvenience and expense of first gassing the Jews. It never occurred even to Hitler to put living Jews in an oven. So we're living with people who are not, they're not human beings. Whatever they are, they're animals. So if all nations are like that at that time, or the ones around the Middle East, that's the people we're dealing with. And that's what you do with people like that, the Torah is telling us. And have no mercy. I'm aware of the time, by the way. I don't want to keep it too long, so we'll start wrapping up, but I want to finish the chapter. Taking this into Rambam, we're almost done with the chapter. So it spells it out. Not every nation, the Chiti, the Amori, the Kanani, the Prizi, the Chivi, the Yavusi. This is specifically the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and also the Girgashites, which is another story, why it's not listed, but includes them too. L'man asher lo yalamdu etchem lasot kechol to'avotam asher asu le'Elohehem v'chatatem l'Hashem Elohei. You wipe them out, that they should not lead you into suddenly taking your sons. Their women will be sexy and hot and attract your sons to them. And the next thing you know, your sons are worshiping their gods and becoming like them and giving birth to children who no longer are children of like a holy nation, but have turned into people who also cut pregnant women's stomachs open. They'll take your children, your grandchildren. You won't. Their women will take your men, your boys. That's what happens. And so the Torah is telling us. I want to wrap up the chapter, so I'm just going to go with English now. When in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time in order to capture it, right? It took Grant months and months to get Vicksburg. If you're in the beginning of a siege, they still have food. You, in your own refrigerators, you have food? Does your supermarkets currently have food? Takes time till all the food runs out and the wells run dry. It took like 2.5 years, these sieges, the Romans, the Babylonians against Jerusalem. When you're at war and you have the siege, you are not allowed to destroy fruit trees. Interesting. You're allowed to destroy regular trees, but not fruit trees. You must not destroy trees wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. You're not allowed, while laying siege, to decide they have these orange trees or apple trees. We're going to cut them down so that when it's over, you have to leave fruit trees. Are trees of the field human to withdraw before you into the besieged city? What other, what, you think the trees are your enemy? You have to leave the trees. Only trees that you know do not yield fruit may be destroyed. You may cut them down for constructing siege works, right? You're going to build walls. So you need wood. You're going to maybe create certain battering rams. You'll need wood. You can cut down non-fruit bearing trees against a city that is waging war on you until it's been reduced. So that's where we get our tradition that we're not allowed to cut trees. I don't know if perhaps you've heard of that. And so I want to leave it off here right now. And God willing, we're going to skip that last part. And we're going to be touching a little bit from Ketetze, and then we're going to be going right into the Rambam. Rambam, to remind you, gives us the Jewish law, the codes of law that incorporate from the Talmud and from the Mishneh, the Gemara, and other sources. And we're going to keep going deeper and deeper while the war is going on in the Middle East. This will be, as I'm teaching it, not a current events class, but a class in classical concepts of Jewish law in wartime, without application to the present time, other than peripherally the way I've been doing. So I'm very grateful you're here, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. This coming Tuesday, we have a very exciting and painfully poignant class in chapter 31, the last class, closing and finishing the book of Shmuel out of 1 Samuel, the fall of King Saul, very, very hard. And the book ends on a very tragic note, a cliffhanger, and then Shmuel Bet will bring happiness again. And then Sunday, we continue covering more contemporary for another week or two, what's going on with the war. But I had announced that after about another week or two, we're going to shift Sundays back to the classic Sunday classes of studying interesting issues in Jewish law and how they're covered by rabbinic texts. But we've taken out a period of about 3 months covering the war. But this war is unfortunately or otherwise going to go on for 1.5 years. And therefore, we just don't want to spend 1.5 years with Sunday mornings covering the war. We're well aware of what's going on, and we want to go back to our traditional teachings. So thank you very much for being here. It's wonderful to see you.